Predators are an uncommon sight when I go to the hunting near the Rocky Mountains. I wanted to see exactly what I'd be contending with during the hunting season, so I decided I would place some bait fairly deep in the woods. Whatever would take the bait would be a photo captured on my trail cam. I drove to a heavily wooded stretch of a logging road and parked my truck on the side of the road. The fresh air was great to breathe in, and even from the road you could hear the chirps of the birds and insects. This area was new to me, recommended by a family member. He claimed I'd see lots of bears here. I kept the bait, a few pounds of meat slabs, sealed up in a bag, and I trekked into the woods with the bait barrel. I hiked about 15 minutes from the road and reached a small clearing that I was satisfied with. Scanned the ground for the flattened grass, animal tracks in the dirt, any sort of droppings nearby. I found some tracks that looked like a wolf had gone through here fairly recently. No matter, my gun and pepper spray were with me as well. I set up the bait rather quickly, fastened my trail cam to the tree. The camera itself was well hidden thanks to the branches hung on the tree. I would get a clear view of whatever went for the barrel. My expectations were to find a bear within the barrel of meaty bait, but I'd be satisfied in capturing photos of another animal like a mountain lion or a wolf, or even a wolverine that could probably all smell the meat and come to investigate. My trail cam picked up on something much worse. Just about a month later, I went back to retrieve my trail cam. After parking the truck, I had already begun finding some discrepancies from my hike from the last time. There was an eerie silence that carried through the woods. No chirping, nothing. I could hear every step I took almost louder than before. Some people find complete silence to be tranquil, but I'm not one of them. I felt more alert this trek. The alertness made the path to the trail feel much longer. Silence persisted and I finally saw my equipment in view. The barrel had tipped over and was scratched up. The stench of something like a carcass smacked me in the face. I got my gun ready, sure that I had to shoot something, no rustling in the bushes, so I proceeded carefully. The bait was still there, of course. It had begun to spoil. That is where the foul smell was coming from. Oddly enough, there was spindly hairs that were stuck to the bait. I plucked one off the bait. It's still almost a meter long, fully unraveled. What kind of hair was this? Disappointed and still a little bit on edge, I hastily grabbed my trail cam and left everything else behind. I could hear something trudging through the trees in the distance, so I kept the gun at the ready as I left. It was somewhat persistent, as I could hear the sounds of grass being pressed down, shrubs rustled, and twigs branched being stepped on for my most way back. All the noise were far, but persistent. I felt watched, picked up my pace, and I eventually got to the truck. The minute I slammed the door, I heard a strange yell in the distance. My heart skipped several beats and I started the truck up despite feeling the blood nearly freezing. I stepped on the gas and I made my way back home. I had about an hour's drive back to my home, and my thoughts raced on eerie feeling, the fact that the bait wasn't taken, a strange hair, and a god-awful sound, and hopefully it was all solved with the photos on the trail cam. At record speed, I darted to my condo and I got the trail cam photos loaded to my computer. There were lots of photos that were taken and I started from the top. A part of me wishes I didn't. The first batch of photos was primarily just photos of the bait, no animals or anything. Strong wind, swaying trees, things that will probably trip the camera. These photos persisted for a few days. About a week or so in, there were photos from birds landing on the barrel, the other small critters that I could see through the trees. There was even a nice buck in the area that walked through the clearing. It wasn't until the third week I finally saw that I was looking for a bear. Big one too. Looked like it sniffed the barrel, but the photos picked up something that confused me. The bear took off swiftly. I could see photos of dirt and leaves being kicked up. There were a few incidents of this event. The bear would investigate the barrel, notice something out of the camera's range, then run off. I started to get an explanation from the photos about 2 days after the first one, and I saw something that I'm still puzzled by. In one of the photos, wrapped around a tree, looked like a human hand that wasn't there before. I reviewed the cluster of photos taken at one of the later moments. The bear sniffs the barrel, and then the thing's hands hit the tree and the bear takes off. The bear didn't even stand its ground. few days of photos were uneventful until 4 days before I picked up the trail cam. I was both confused and terrified by what I saw on the camera. From out of the clearing I saw what I can only describe as a hairy naked man crawling on all fours towards the barrel at 4 a.m. The hair on his head was almost the entire length of his body. The thing was emaciated and moved abnormally slow judging by the photos. I almost left from the computer chair upon looking at it. There was no explanation for something like this to be in the woods at that time. It reached the barrel and began scratching it all up. The swipes it took at the barrel were cat-like and swift. I took notice that the thing stood up. It was at least 7 feet tall. It knocked it over and began frantically pulling all the meat bait out of the barrel. It held it in his hands and threw it on the ground. It cocked its head up towards the camera as I could see the shine in its eyes reflecting. The thing looked back at the meat and began rolling on top of the meat with its mangy body. It stood back up and unhinged its jaw to let out what I can describe as a scream. My mind paired that scream that I heard upon leaving these photos, and I nearly lost consciousness. I wanted to stop looking at the photos and turn to the authorities, but what could they say anyways? I still had 40 photos to go. I took a few hyperventilating breaths and pushed onwards. It attacked the barrel some more, and its attention then shifted to the trail cam. I think it may have noticed it, because it began to stumble towards after making several irregular steps. It peered down towards the camera. I could see its warped face coming in from left of the angle of the photo. Its eyes were abnormally spaced apart, closer of that of a goat's, but not fully on the side of its head. Its long hair swayed in and what I assume was either abnormal movements of the wind. Eventually, after investigating the camera, it crouched back onto all fours and scurried into the trees directly away from the camera. There were a few photos remaining of mundane activities, much like before the horrific encounter. Nothing touched the bait, and it was pretty clear why. If I knew that thing was out there, I would never have gone to my trail cam. I certainly never going back there. Ever. I want to delete these photos, but a part of me thinks it's worth putting a case together for the sheriff or something. It was a close call. Who knows? What could have happened if I had gone there 4 days earlier to grab my camera? I probably wouldn't be here and be writing this.